Krown Countdown U is supported by the Guelph Griffins.
And welcome to the monthly TV edition of Krown Countdown U. Well, we certainly had a noisy off-season January, and February seems like the calm before the storm. Here to play weatherman later on the show are Gord Randall in studio and Justin Dunk in Toronto. But first, it's recruiting season, and of course, with every year, there are winners, losers, big fish, and the ones that got away. Canada Football Chat has been tracking the success of all 27 teams in the U. In terms of total rankings, CFC declares the Calgary Dinos the clear winner by a wide margin with 12 top 100s committed. Conference rival UBC is a distant second. As for average player rankings, the Montreal Carabin lead for consistency across the board. In fact, 3 of the 5 RSEQ's teams rank at the top of the list in the CFC Top 27. One surprise institution on the top rank board is perennial OUA doormat, the Waterloo Warriors. When the Black and Gold hired Chris Bertoia away from Western, they knew they were getting one of the finest recruiting minds in the country. Chris joins us from Waterloo. Well, Bert, according to Canada Football Chat, you've got a top 5 recruiting class. A lot of people are talking about what Waterloo has done in terms of recruiting. But the question I have for you is, how do you go out and recruit against that record of yours that has built up over the last few years?
Yeah, the philosophy when I got hired 2 years ago was to sell our strengths and believe in what we have as our strengths. And obviously, Waterloo's an academic school. It's an elite academic university recognized across the country. And, it's also a university that crosses borders. So the degree is valuable. And it's one of those things, instead of fighting, and complaining that we have high academic standards and we're not getting any breaks, we've embraced it. And, it's Darrell Adams, our recruiting coordinator, that came across, from Carleton and kind of experienced that whole rebuilding process and started from the ground up. He's got a slogan on the bottom of his email that says Stanford of the North. And then that's something that we look at and say, okay, Stanford's an elite university. It's the number 3 ranked school in the world, and they do pretty damn good at football and also in other various athletic departments. So really, we go at it with that regard, and then obviously you top it up with the fact that you got an opportunity to play. I mean, our average team age this year was 18.8 years old. We're in our off-season training program right now. We have 78 guys on our roster, and 67 of our 78 guys are in first or second year. I had the good fortune, as always, he's been a mentor to me, Glenn Constantine, who's, he's the grand poobah, he's Buddha, and then he talked about his Laval team being the youngest he's ever had in his 16 or 17, whatever it is, years he's been at Laval and winning all those Vanniers. And this past season was his youngest team, and they're 3 years older on average than us. We can't go to a beer store and buy a case of beer legally. And, we're a young CJEP team. And it's not a built-in excuse necessarily, but it's one of those things where we are youthful, and we're going to do it with integrity, and we're going to build from the ground up. But what we're selling to the kids is the fact that you're going to be competing against like-aged players. You're not competing against 21 and 22-year-olds that have been 4 more years in the gym and 4 more years being coached properly and watching film and just developing and being better athletes. You're competing against similar guys. And then hopefully in 2 years that changes and our story changes. And that's kind of it. It's a combination, and I call it the win-win combination. I also call it a chance for them to come in, and I took it from Brian Dobie, who's an awesome guy, and he's been a mentor as well. But, come to Waterloo and build the bandwagon versus going to an established program and jumping on their bandwagon. And there's nothing wrong with that, because my hope is that in 2 years we're going to be asking guys to jump on our bandwagon. But right now, factually, there's a better opportunity to compete, earn a dress spot, and play and make a difference as a young athlete. And And the reality of it is there's still going to be guys that choose successful schools, and that's important. So our philosophy is that you're going to get a great opportunity, but at the same time, if you look at the recruiting we've done this year, we're recruiting guys. Last year our recruiting class was ranked high, but it was more of we had a lot of quality players come and do a lot of good things this past season. But we had 60 plus recruits coming, so we got ranked high because numbers and stuff. But this year it's not as much numbers; it's more quality versus quantity. But at the same time, we've just kind of embraced the dual factor and just saying, hey, let's sell our school, let's sell co-op, and earning money. I mean, realistically, we're the cheapest university to go to in Ontario. If you're getting a $4,500 scholarship and you're on co-op, once you get into that stream of 4 months of school and 4 months of work, that 4 months of work is paying for your 4 months of school. We have 5 or 6 guys on our team right now that own houses and are property managers. So, we also sell to the fact that, you're going to be the other school's players' bosses.
Do you find yourself going after the same recruits, say, that your crosstown competitor Laurier is going after, or are you going after a different type of student? Because if Laurier is having success in your town, I've got to think that that's tapping into some of the talent that you're trying to reach out to.
Sure we are. I mean, when it comes down to brass tacks, you get into a Final Three, and it's Waterloo, and I mean it's not slinging mud at any means. These teams are doing well, and every school has merit academically, and every school has merit athletically. Some have more merit athletically, and some have more merit academically. We have a lot of merit academically. Right now, we don't have much athletically, and it could be, you can gauge it and judge it however you want from your own perspective, regarding each and every school. But I kind of look at it and I go, we have great. We're at the top of the food chain when it comes to academics, and right now, results-oriented wise, we're at the bottom of the food chain. So it's kind of one of those things you juggle and you go, yeah, we're recruiting different people, and there's sometimes where you got to go after the best guys, and then all of a sudden now it's like, wait a second, it's Carleton, Guelph, and Waterloo. Well, I don't know. Maybe I'll get in trouble for saying this, Jim, but I'm going to sit here and as a coaching staff, we're going to say this kid's making a decision based on football. Now all of a sudden you throw in it's Waterloo, Toronto, and Queens, or now he's making a decision based on academics. That's the reality of it. And someone wants to say that I'm negative talking, well, they can go for it. It's factual. It's reality, and we're recruiting all of the same sorts. There's lots of schools that we're in head-to-head battles with, each year, and this year it's been quite a few with a few certain OUA schools, and sometimes it comes down to region as well, and relationships and your area scouts and whatever it may be, but it comes down to a whole plethora of different dynamics, I think, and each and every year is different.
I got to ask you, what do you think of the new OUA schedule where it really plays to strength of opponent? Does that give you more winning opportunity in your mind as the season unfolds?
From, I guess, a non-playoff making teams, we get to play each and every team next year that didn't make the playoffs last year. And from the other perspective, and I lived that perspective, coaching 6 years at Western, it baffled me that, you play a team in the Yates Cup, and based on, a coin flip or a bingo ball going in a little, circular motion, you're not going to have a rematch of the conference championship game. I mean, it's asinine. So I think it's better off for the league. You talk about trying to create a little more parity. I think it's a constructive way to do it, and I think it's good. At the same time, our schedule this year coming up, we've got we're opening at Windsor, and then we host York and Toronto. So theoretically, and I mean, I'm sure everyone, I watch your shows, so everyone listens and watches, and This is no disrespect, but, you know, when I look at, hey, how are we going to turn this thing around? We got to start winning some damn football games for my own safety. Every time I drive down past the Lowe's, I look to see if they got any rope on sale, Jim.
Well, Bert, thanks very much for this. I appreciate you joining us.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jim.
Well, Justin, one of the reasons they hired Bertoia in Waterloo is because he's a great recruiter. He's obviously getting the job done, but we've seen that before at York as well, and they haven't been able to turn the corner.
Certainly, but I think there's a big difference with Bertoia because he was able to get it done so well at Western that on the recruiting trail, he had already built up such a great amount of connections that he was able to get it done, and he's clearly transferred that over to Waterloo quickly and made it seem like Waterloo is a place that is on the rise, even if it's slowly.
But Gord, I think if there's one team that's really won the recruiting battle, it's Calgary, and they've done so by making sure that no one is getting in that town.
Absolutely. And that's the biggest story out west by far, is that Calgary's held on to Fortress Calgary, so to speak, because a lot of people thought when Blake Neal moved over to UBC, his reputation was that he's the ace recruiter. He's the guy that turned that into Fortress Calgary for the University of Calgary. But Wayne Harris has done a fantastic job at keeping that up. And I believe, and I have no basis for this speculation, but I do believe that Blake Neal is getting a little bit frustrated by the fact that he hasn't made a lot of inroads in that Calgary area. He's starting to pull a few guys, but not those top-notch, top-tier guys. And just on that other note, Jim, I've been saying for a year that Chris Bertoia is going to turn that program around at Waterloo, so I'm feeling pretty good about that because he's absolutely killed it this offseason.
Justin, we've gone through about a decade of coaches and programs that have had success recruiting nationally. Do you see some of these programs kind of backtracking a little bit and creating a recruiting footprint that's more local and more concentrated these days?
I would agree with you, Jim. I think teams have really focused on especially landing the big-time talent within their town. Nate Behar is a perfect example who went to Carleton, that Western let him get out of London. That doesn't happen too often, so you want to focus on your own backyard before you start going out nationally, coast to coast.
And is that perhaps one of the reasons why Calgary is now having more success with local players? If you take a look at the success that Blake Neal had, it was bringing Rashawn Simonize in. It was bringing players that actually right across the board from Montreal, Vancouver, all over the place. There wasn't a big opportunity for Calgary guys to really step up in those starring roles.
I don't know that I'd entirely agree with that assertion, because every year when you looked at that Calgary roster, a lot of those supporting cast guys were Calgary guys. And I remember year in, year out being shocked by how much of that talent was pouring out of Calgary. I mean, it's really a hotbed. And along with this trend towards regionalism, that's one of the reasons why you're seeing a lot of the big market teams really lead the way. UBC, Calgary, back east you're looking at Montreal leading the way, Laval obviously, right? Toronto being the one exception, but other than that, we're talking big metro areas that are really leading the way in a lot of the conferences across the country, and I think that fits this trend as well.
Now, during the offseason, we have time to check south of the line to see how Canadians are developing on the NCAA path. One who has taken a long road to get to a D1 side is Oakville, Ontario's Nathan Rourke. Rourke, along with his family, pulled up stakes from Ontario and moved to Elmore, Alabama, where he quarterbacked Edgewood Academy. Edgewood is no ordinary school. In fact, when Rourke graduated, the school was riding the longest winning streak for a prep side in the entire US of A, 71 games. Not liking the scholarship options as a freshman, he went JUCO for a year at Fort Smith Community College. Now, Rourke set himself up quite nicely with a scholarship to Ohio University in Athens, which also happens to be the college of BC high school grads Malik Irons and Matt Seymour. Rourke joined me via Skype earlier. Nate, you must be eternally grateful that your family was willing and able to relocate from southern Ontario to Alabama to help further your development in the sport. How much of this journey has been a family affair?
Oh, it's 100%. And yeah, as you said, my senior year in high school when we moved to Alabama, that wasn't just me. That was That was my mom and my brother coming down with me, and that was them kind of putting what they had going on in Canada aside and putting it on pause for a little bit, just so I could go and play at a level that I'd be able to get recruited at. And it was really a blessing to have them around, and I think it just kind of goes to show the support I have for my dream and for my aspirations. So I'm very grateful for what they have done for me.
Let's talk prep and Edgewood Academy, Alabama, where the place is absolutely football mad. Does that culture and hype assist somehow in your development?
I think you kind of have a good idea of what the expectations are down in the South, especially in Alabama, where that's kind of a football hotbed. They have big expectations, and that community was really relying on that winning streak to keep going. But at the same time, that culture and that environment was so fun and so exciting to be a part of, that it was really something that we took away from as a family, and we realized that this is the big deal. We were so fortunate, even though I didn't get a scholarship, that we were so fortunate to have gone through that process, because we were able to experience some of the things that a southern small town football environment was able to offer.
So what do you do for fun in a place like Elmore, Alabama, population 1,278? Explain to me what that town is like.
Really small, and as I said, all about football. It was cool, to go into the local restaurant and see pictures and jerseys and of the local high school teams around there, which was something that was kind of absent from back home in Oakville and in a lot of places in Canada. It's just such a big deal, but in terms of free time and everything, I spent a lot of time with family during that experience. That was one of those times that we really got close and we really got together, because we were just kind of experiencing something new together, and it was really valuable.
You had some scholarship offers, but they were short of expectations. So then it was off to the alma mater of Jason Pierre-Paul, Fort Scott Community College. Take me through the process of picking the right JUCO.
Through the recruiting process for JUCO, the criteria that we were kind of looking for was we're looking for a program that really was serious about me and really wanted me, because what happens in JUCO is that they take a lot of kids, and a lot of them I didn't want to be just another name. And that's what Fort Scott kind of showed me. I was talking to a lot of other schools, and they were, the only way that they really communicated to me was through social media or text and stuff like that. Not a lot of phone calls. But Fort Scott, their head coach, drove down from Kansas to Alabama at my high school at Edgewood, and met with my parents, met with my mom, and that really showed how serious they were about me, first of all, and second of all, how much I meant to them and their recruiting. And if they were able to show that level of commitment to me, I think that was comfortable for me and my family to say, hey, this is how we're going to commit to you in the same way. And that's how it kind of worked out.
After an outstanding year in JUCO, it came down to two schools, Akron and Ohio. I understand that the stability in the Ohio program influenced your decision.
Well, it was a very tough decision. I'll say that right off the bat. And, it's funny, my senior year of high school, we didn't have anything that I was really, serious about or really considering, and not having a lot of options, but having two options from Akron and from Ohio was enough for us, because it was such a tough decision. And we really we did our due diligence. We really, did a lot of, research outside of the visits and stuff like that. But as you said, the thing that really stuck out for us was the fact that this coaching staff has been around for a long time, and they want to. I mean, every coach is going to say that they're going to be around, but with college football especially, it's such a revolving door, and they move around all the time. You can see it, instances of that all the time. And this coaching staff wants to be here. The quarterback coach wants to be here. The head coach has been here for a long time, and he's going to retire in Athens. And if they're going to get another head coach, they're going to go internally, and I'm confident in that, and a lot of people here are too. My head coach, Kale Pick at Fort Scott, he played at Kansas, and he went through 4 different head coaches and 5 different position coaches when he was there. And he told me how difficult that was for him to have to prove himself to a new coach and a new coaching staff every single year, basically, right? And so I'm with that, and I feel that I made the right choice.
So not everyone can do what Nathan Rourke and his family did, but we've seen different paths for quarterbacks. Andrew Buckley, he's the hometown guy every step of the way. Brandon Bridge, Canadian high school, an NCAA background with a transfer in between, and now he's with the Riders. And then you've got Michael O'Connor with high school stops in Tennessee and Florida, a stop at Penn State, now at UBC. Just does it come down to fit, Justin, when it comes to a path for a quarterback in his development?
There's certainly a lot of pathways to take, Jim, and we've seen a number of them over the years. As you mentioned, Andrew Buckley, the hometown kid, going to Calgary, winning a couple of Heck Crichtons. Now he's the number 3 quarterback with the Calgary Stampeders. Look at a guy like Brandon Bridge, went down south immediately, was I believe at Alcorn State where he picked up the name Air Canada, transferred to South Alabama, became a starter, and he put himself on the map that way. Michael O'Connor, obviously a big-name quarterback with UBC, went down to one of these big-time academies down in the States in IMG, was at Penn State, decided to transfer back to U Sports to get a legitimate shot, and a shot that he knew he was going to get in terms of being a starter. And then there's Nathan Rourke, who goes down to Alabama, plays some high school football down there at a pretty high level, doesn't get the offers he wanted coming out, goes a JUCO route, and then ends up at Ohio, and where it sounds like he's going to be given a pretty fair shot to compete for that job, at least in the next year. So lots of pathways you can take, and more we're seeing talented Canadian quarterbacks get a realistic chance in the NCAA and in the pro game.
And one of the things, Andrew Buckley aside, one of the things that seems to be a common thread for any of the quarterbacks that get a shot in the CFL, even if they are Canadian, is some sort of an NC2A connection. It's one of the reasons why Michael O'Connor has so much buzz with the CFL is because he has that NC2A pedigree, despite the fact that he will have played the vast majority of his college career in U Sports. And one of the things that I really hope doesn't become a trend is this concept like Nathan Rourke, and nothing to him on his family. It's fantastic what they've done. But that becoming a trend would be an absolute shame, because that turns the quarterbacking position into the equivalent of goaltending in hockey, where it becomes a socioeconomic thing that rules out a lot of people who could be extremely talented at that position.
And that's one of the things that when I was at the Football Canada meetings just a week ago, we talked about accessibility in the sport. That's one of the things that puts football, I think, ahead of hockey and a couple of the other sports out there, is that it's affordable for families, and you tapped on to the socioeconomic barriers in hockey. When it comes to academies, these are big investments for families. Is it worthwhile when really the focus should be on education?
Yeah, and it's a minefield, the academy system. And I know that in the Ottawa area in particular, academies are growing by leaps and bounds right now. It's a really trendy thing, and my only advice to any parents out there that might be watching is buyer beware. One of the things that you've noticed with both Nathan Rourke and with Michael O'Connor is they went to very well-established places in the United States that have been around for a while. IMG is a powerhouse in both football and baseball. Nathan O'Rourke in Alabama there. We're not talking these startups in Canada that are just trying to make their way. So be careful. Don't sign up to be the guinea pig in those systems. Once they're established, great concept. And I know a lot of American schools love to focus on the prep circuit, so there may be slightly more exposure. But you can get your name out there if you excel on the field no matter where you are. So like Jim said, focus on the academics, because in the long run, we heard Chris Bertoia earlier this episode, that's what it's all about.
So, Justin, when you take a look outside of the quarterback position, you got a running back up in Edmonton, Chuba Hubbard. He's going down to Oklahoma State. He didn't need an academy. What are your thoughts?
Well, and Josh Palmer, a receiver, is going to Tennessee too. My thoughts on academies are it sort of stamps the player in terms of being legitimate, right or wrong. Now, I do understand it costs a lot of money, and we talk a lot about education up here, which I know the panel values. But down in the States, let's be real, to get to an NCAA school, these guys probably aren't focused so much on the education, and instead focused on how quickly they can get to the NFL, especially when you're talking about a guy like Matt Leiner back in the day taking ballroom dancing classes and stuff like that. It's more about getting that first school interested, and then the wave comes. And if an academy is the way that some families or prospects see that is the way to do it, I don't blame them for going that route.
So February's been a bit of a quiet month. We had a whole lot of noise in January, but in terms of news, I think this month coming up is going to have a whole lot in it. Justin, what do you think the top story is going to be?
For me, it's going to be NFL Canadian Pro Days. Anthony Auclair, the tight end from Laval, Jeff Gray, the offensive lineman from Manitoba, will both host Pro Days on their respective campuses, and I think that is a huge deal. Manitoba goes back-to-back here with David Onyemata being there, having a Pro Day in 2016, now Gray in 2017, and it is a huge deal that more and more we are seeing these pop up in Canada.
For me personally, I've noticed that there's a pretty high-profile U Sports program still in search of a head coach, so I'm going to be keeping my eye on the University of Saskatchewan, where they have undertaken a prolonged coaching search, and it is getting late in the process, so I would be shocked if that doesn't wrap up in the month of March. I know there have been a number of names bandied about for that position. Doesn't seem to be a clear lead dog at this point in time, so that should be really interesting to watch play out. The other thing I'm keeping a little bit of my eye on, by the way, Carl Brennan's name has now come up in CFL rumors the last couple of days. I'm seeing if there's any substance to that, because that would be very interesting in terms of a development at Laval.
I think one of the big news stories out there might be interlock between two conferences that are out there right now that have been kicking the can around. There needs to be some sort of meeting, some sort of engagement, some sort of news generated around this, because the clock is running out for 2018. And if people don't get together and start talking, there won't be any interlock for 2018. We should remind you that coming up on KCU Radio, on the TSN radio network, Rob Baker from the Tragically Hip will join us to talk about Queen's Golden Gales football, and Tim Baines from the Ottawa Sun will be on the roundtable. So for everyone on our Krown Countdown U crew, we're going to say, get out to the game, get out to the practice.
Listen to the show.
There you go. Get out and listen to the show. Krown Produce secures produce locally and from around the world for Canadian retailers. Krown Produce is also proud to secure sponsorship of University football on Shaw. Krown Produce, supporting Canadian retailers and Canadian amateur football.